I just welcome the event we have.
I believe, you see, some my friend, they themselves are businessmen. I just inquire, what is the real sort of cause of this problem? It looks, you see, things, so-called market force, you see, create these problem. Then he mentioned too much speculation and ultimately greed. He mentioned that's at least one sort of contributor for these sort of crises. In that case, I think the many different religious traditions, you see, have some sort of help, potential to help, you see, reduce greed and self-discipline. I don't know. The economic crisis is something very urgent. So it could be helpful to reduce some other conflict in the name of faith or nationality, these things. That's also possible. So I don't know. Next question.
Next question, please.
This is Tejinder from New Europe. The EU is fighting this pressure from China after the cancellation of the summit and the statement today about threatening Mr. Sarkozy that he should mend his ways. But what do you personally see that why China is rejecting your middle policy, which is it's non-violent. It is, if I'm not going to go into detail, but why do you see them rejecting your policy? And what is it? How are you dealing with the young followers who want to take up arms and really want to? They say that the Chinese are not going to listen to this non-violent ways. Thank you.
Actually, whole world knows we are not separatist. And also many Chinese writers and thinkers, and also many Chinese students, when they have opportunity to know the reality, they're all very supportive. And in fact, very critical about their government policy. However, the Chinese government still accuse us we are splittist. Actually, we ourselves confused. Everybody now clearly sort of aware we are not splittist. But you see, Chinese government still, accuse us as splittist. So I don't know. Then, as far as the militant, you referred militant, young Tibetan. Yes, not only young, but also among elders. Now who criticize about our approach. So these people now saying, now we have to fight for complete independence, such as youth organization. But all these people firmly committed non-violent principle. Sometimes the Chinese government create some impression the Tibetan youth organization are terrorists. This is totally wrong. No proof. no basis. Maybe some individual just express some kind of violence, these things. These individual, but as an organization and a group of people, now for example, the recent meeting in Dharamsala, about 600 people from 19 countries. Now, actually met there, everybody enjoyed equal sort of free discussion. Rinpoche, professor, as a elected political leadership since 2001. At the meeting, Rinpoche also just a simple Tibetan citizen. Equally sort of discussed. So they finally, after 6 days of discussion, at that time I deliberately avoid. If I go there, if I indicate my feeling, then that might be hindrance for their free expression. So finally, even those people, like because the youth organization and some individual who really, they fight for independence. Now their voice, these also, they firmly express their commitment for non-violence. So finally, although their sort of view also reflected, but majority of them, they endorsed our existent policy, middle wave approach. So now here, and then after that, our international supporters sort of meeting in Delhi. How many delegates? About 100 delegates for 30 countries. 30 countries. 3 days meeting in Delhi. So there are also some voice about independence, but majority again endorse our existing approach. So now here, so I'm happily come here with certain kind of authorization, mandate. So like that. Next question.
Next question, please.
Henrik Hübschen from the Deutsche Welle. A question to both of you, if I may. You both mentioned the talks between the representatives of the Dalai Lama and the Chinese government that have been stopped. Would you say that those talks were only done by the Chinese government to calm criticism during the Olympic Games, or did they ever mean serious talks?
Unlike previous meeting, the Chinese government officially announced the meeting will take place. In fact, before that formal announcement publicly, the Chinese Foreign Ministry called ambassador in Peking of some countries, called in the ministry and informed they are going to meet Dalai Lama's representative. And then, just before President Hu Jintao visit to Japan, some Japanese correspondent, response to some Japanese correspondent, the Hu Jintao also acknowledged that the coming meeting. And he expressed seriousness. So at that time, we very much expected. Now, after 10th March crisis, the Chinese leadership may realize how serious inside Tibet. So then, if the Chinese government, carry realistic approach about this crisis, then we are 100% sort of ready to join, help them to cool down the situation. And actually, I offer through writing directly to Wu Jintao. We are ready to help cool down the situation, stop the demonstration, like that. But then they sort of also the propaganda continuously accuse us. Then it's very clear they are simply, I think, they do not want to talk with us. They believe just through suppression, under gun, they can they can solve this problem. That's a totally mistake. Now, nearly 60 years passed. At least 3-4 generations passed. The resentment from grandparent to parent, parent to children, children to grandchildren, continuously. So we are going to organize one meeting. Chinese scholars or Chinese brothers, sisters in free country that we are now decide. And since 10th March, more than, as far as I know, more than 200 articles in Chinese language wrote by Chinese scholars or Chinese Chinese intellectuals. Everyone very, very supportive about our struggle and critical about government policy. And after our memorandum become published, just before I come, I left Dharamsala, I received one article wrote by one Chinese. He mentioned in the memorandum come from Dalai Lama's side. Everything according Chinese constitution. There's nothing wrong. He mentioned like that. So since 10th March, I expressing from time to time my faith towards Chinese government now become thinner and thinner. Although in the top among the top leaders, there are two groups. One more hardliner, one more lenient. But so far, the hardliners, you see, they become more upper hand. But my faith towards Chinese people never shaken. So since 10th March, you see, many occasions I met some Chinese professors, some Chinese intellectuals, some Chinese businessmen, some Chinese students in Australia, in America, in Europe, in India, in Japan, everywhere. Very positive. Like that. So that's a hopeful sign. And then also the People's Republic of China, the communist government, totalitarian government. I usually describe four era: Mao's era, Deng Xiaoping era, Jiang Zemin era, Wu Jintao's era. These 4 eras, the reality must change. So accordingly, the authoritarian party also have some ability to adjust according to the new reality. Now Wu Jintao emphasizes harmonious society. Now I think the Deng Xiaoping era, he have such courage. Now give up Marxism. So some my friend now they describe today's China is capitalist totalitarian regime, no longer socialist country. So the Deng Xiaoping's famous expression: so long mice can catch, and a white cat or black cat doesn't matter. So whether capitalism or socialism doesn't matter, so long you get richness, right? Getting richer. So these are, you see, they according to new reality, they change. Even their ideology change. So now Wu Jintao emphasis the harmonious society. Now for that, transparency, very important. Because harmony, as I mentioned earlier, trust is the key factor. For that, transparency is very, very crucial. Now, after immediate earthquake in Sichuan, the government way of handling, quite transparent. So at that time, we really hoped now that spirit may carry continuously, but that not happened. But in any way, I think the 17th party meeting, the president in his speech, I think the 60th time they use democracy in his speech. Although these leaders, it's a very long speech, there are 60 times repeat democracy. So that means, so now climate is such, now the word democracy is something fit. So, something relevant. So now, only question of time, they have to implement more democratic principle. That is interest for long run People's Republic of China. Like that.
There was a question for me as well. So I will give you.
Thank you. Now sit down.
I will give you.
No chair.
I will give you my answer as well. One could have the impression that the talks were just made because of the Olympic Games. And the Chinese government itself can only give the proof that this was not the case. And that's why I said in my welcome speech to His Holiness, we expect that there are future negotiations and that they lead to the necessary results. I said in my own German language, wir äußern unsere dringende Erwartung, dass zukünftige Gespräche zu den gewünschten Ergebnissen führen. So we are demanding further negotiations and we want results that the Tibetan people can live its culture and its religion.
Maria?
Yeah, a question to both. I would like to know if you think that the suspension of the EU-China summit causes any damage at all to the Tibetan cause in terms that maybe lack of dialogue between the EU and China that would hurt also your cause? And to the Dalai Lama, would you have preferred to meet President Sarkozy just another week? Thanks.
Okay, the Dalai Lama orders me to start first, so I'm obeying. So I think we have to go on with the negotiations. And the President of France, who is the President of the European Council, as far as what I read in the papers, I have not private information so far. He is in the meeting in Gdansk, in Danzig, where the Peace Nobel Prize winner Lech Walesa has invited the other Nobel Prize winners. I had an invitation myself, but I can't go there because I have other obligations already, and I always stick to my program where I made my first commitment, so I realized that, and I am happy that I see His Holiness here today, not only here in this press conference, but we in the plenary, and we had a private meeting in my office as well. So I think nobody can ask President Sarkozy not to meet the Dalai Lama in Gdansk. It's normal that they meet there because President Sarkozy is there in Gdansk. That's what I read in the papers. As far as the suspension of the summit is concerned, I hope that in a very near future there will be a summit between the European Union and China. And of course, the question of Tibet should be a part of this summit. This is my request to the European institutions, to the Council and to the Commission who are part of this dialogue. And I hope that everything what develops in the future will be beneficial to the Tibetan people.
Your question? I don't think much important. In any way, I want to respond this way. I already have meeting with President's wife, attractive wife. So now I'm looking forward to see her husband.
That is great.
There was a question on the right, please.
Just Sébastien Maillard from the French daily La Croix. Your Holiness, a follow-up question on this. Since you have a long experience in trying to dialogue with the Chinese government, what would be your advice tomorrow to the French president you will be meeting in Poland to try to liaise differently with the Chinese now that they have postponed this summit that was due to happen on Monday that has been cancelled?
Oh, of course. Since President is elected, he show his concern and interest and about Tibet. Then also he expressed he want to see me. But I have no particular sort of agenda, political agenda. Of course, I'm happy meeting a president of one nation, which I think very sort of what's today. Many people in French, many French, showing genuine interest about Tibetan culture, and automatically very sort of sympathetic. So, president of that country, I'm great honor meet him. Then, like usually, my visit different countries, basically non-political, except visit here or White House. Otherwise, it's no political agenda. So, yesterday and today, I have some difficult subject which have to discuss with concerned people. Now, after tomorrow, no that kind of sort of complicated sort of work. So I'm just a guest of Lech Wałęsa. So I'm going to meet him, and also the French president, and hopefully Gorbachev also, and some other Nobel laureate. So just a reunion, and say hello. That's all, and enjoy Polish meal. Oh, Polish meal. That's all.
Yes, on the left, yes. Yeah.
It's okay? Maria, it's okay? Do you hear me? Maria Papadopoulou from Athens Daily Eleftherotypia. Your Holiness, there is before and after. I mean before and after the Olympic Games. Could you please tell us what was the reason that you did not accept the invitation of the European Parliament to come here before the Olympic Games?
Could do, yeah.
You said you could come any time.
Oh, yes.
Anytime.
Okay. Although you see, they not fixed date. So any time. So according my convenience, I choose this. Not calculated. So don't see every my movement some political calculation. Don't see that.
So
Chinese always look, you see, with great suspicion every my movement. Even I think drinking one water, I think the Chinese looks at some political significance. Too much.
So I wrote the letter myself, the invitation letter, and we left the date entirely open. And His Holiness is the last speaker before the European Parliament in the framework of the intercultural dialogue, and I think it was a highlight to have His Holiness here today.
Oh, I think one factor, and since, you see, the 10th March crisis, then eventually, particularly our last meeting, or 7th meeting, then our hope, then, you see, they much diminish. So we decided to call meeting. So then I thought better after that meeting. Otherwise, myself, you see, not Kazuda, as I mentioned earlier, not Kazuda, full authorization or Kazuda mandate. So now this is very right time. Now all our meeting, you see, took place, and then endorsed our existing sort of Kazuda approach. So my talk with full confidence from our side.
That you are intending to have a meeting with Chinese in the diaspora, Chinese living outside China, in a country. Could you tell us when and which country will be this one? And for the President Pocherin, President of the Parliament, do you think that the European Union, that always speaks about human rights with the Chinese, with the Russians, should put prior conditions in order to meet them? For example, in this case, doing something in relation with Tibet, for example, before meeting with the Chinese delegation and leaders? Thank you.
I think firstly, I always say telling people the Tibet issue is moral issue, a just issue. And those people and also media who really showing concern about Tibet, I usually describe these are not pro-Tibetan, but rather pro-justice. So the meeting, some of the leaders, they usually, as I mentioned earlier, come Strasbourg or Brussels or Washington. I have certain sort of point to discuss with concerned leader. In such case, if you see meeting did not take place, then I feel little sort of sad. But usually, wherever I go, as I mentioned earlier, non-political. Whether you see leader meet or not much problem, not differences. But meantime, since this is Chinese side, distorted information, distorted propaganda, so much. So therefore, it is my responsibility to explain what's the truth to people, including leader, as much as possible. And also media people. Like that. The first part. The venue, the place where meeting take place. When? Not yet decide. Where we have to find suitable place. Perhaps I think in practical level, some help in money. Now, for example, my recent sort of lecture on Buddhism in English side Manchester, Nottingham.
Sherwood Forest.
Oh yes, yeah. There, you see, they arranged. You see, Nottingham. So one reason, the hotels, the accommodation there much cheaper than London. So that's practical sort of, a practical matter. So we have to find a place where hopefully some richer family or richer sort of company, friends, you see, provide some accommodation. But most of these the Chinese freedom fighters and also the intellectuals, not very rich. And we too.
So my part of the answer is there should not be conditions for the negotiations and discussions with the Chinese government between the European Union and China. If we would make conditions, we would a little bit behave like the Chinese, to cancel or to suspend a meeting. So this would be the same level. I think this is not advisable. So my approach is rather to be firm in the negotiations, and Tibet should always be on the table when we have our negotiations with the government of China. And so hopefully we can convince the Chinese government that it is in the interest of China to have a good result for Tibet. So I think we have an obligation to speak to the Chinese government and to explain to them that it's in their interest that they get recognition in the world if they recognize the liberty and the identity of the Tibetan people.
Now I think I want to share another point. Some my Chinese friends who are really patriotic. So they sort of was telling me the people's problem, China's ambition is become superpower. It deserves, because most populated nation and ancient nation and Chinese people, generally speaking, hardworking, cultured people. So it is that it deserves. Now, in order to become superpower, manpower, that already there. The military power, that also there. Now, economy power, that also there. Now, one important sort of factor, that is moral authority. That is lacking. The image of people from China, because very, very poor record about human rights and religious freedom and freedom of expression and also the free media. Too much censorship. Too much censorship. So therefore, the image of China in the field of moral authority, very, very poor. Now the sensible Chinese realize now China should pay more attention in this field in order to get more respect from the rest of the world, in order to carry more responsibility, world affair, like that. Now look, Darfur. And also some, my friend, you see, refer the Khmer Rouge, the genocide in Cambodia. Without Chinese communist sort of support, difficult. And Burmese military junta, without Chinese support, difficult. North Korea, without Chinese support, difficult. So that's the image of this planet. So therefore, the Chinese leadership, of course, they want China becoming more influential nation, not just through military power or economic power, but some moral authority. So in that case, Tibet issue and also the issue of Xinjiang autonomous region. And these, the proper handling these problems is immense sort of impact in the about 7 million Chinese in Hong Kong. Up to now, some fear. Many Chinese in Hong Kong, although they happily join with motherland, but this is some uncomfortable, some sort of uncertainties or skeptical. And then Taiwan, reunification, Taiwan. There also the Chinese government proper, realistic handling about their own domestic problem is something very relevant. So, I always telling our Chinese brothers, sisters, in order to be a superpower and responsible member of world, that certain field you must improve, like that.
Okay.
So, thank you very much. You want to know what inside? Yes.
Sorry, would you sit here? I just welcome the 11.
I believe, you see, some my friend, they themselves are businessmen. I just inquire, what is the real sort of cause of this problem? It looks, you see, things, market force, so-called market force, you see, create these problem. Then he mentioned too much speculation and ultimately greed. He mentioned that's at least one sort of contributor for these sort of crisis. In that case, confused. Everybody now clearly sort of aware. We are not splitist. But you see, the government, Chinese government still, you see, accuse us as splitist. So I don't know. Then as far as the militant, you mentioned, you referred militant, young Tibetan. Yes, not only young, but also among elders. Now who criticize about our approach. So these people now saying, now we have to fight for complete independence, such as youth organization. But all these people firmly committed non-violent principle. Sometimes the Chinese government create some impression the Tibetan youth organization are terrorists. This is totally wrong. No proof. No basis. Maybe some individual, I think the many different religious traditions, you see, have some sort of help, potential to help, you see, reduce greed and self-discipline. I don't know. The economic crisis is something very urgent. So it could be helpful to reduce some other conflict in the name of faith or nationality, these things, that also possible. So I don't know. Next question.
Next question, please.
This is Tejinder from New Europe. The EU is fighting this pressure from China after the cancellation of the summit and the statement today about threatening Mr. Sarkozy that he should mend his ways. But what do you personally see that why China is rejecting your middle policy, which is it's non-violent. It is, if I'm not going to go into detail, but why do you see them rejecting your policy? And what is it? How are you dealing with the young followers who want to take up arms and really want to? They say that the Chinese are not going to listen to this non-violent ways. Thank you.
Actually, the whole world knows we are not separatist. And also many Chinese writers and thinkers, and also many Chinese students, when they have opportunity to know the reality, they're all very supportive and in fact very critical about their government policy. However, the Chinese government still accuse us we are splittist. Actually, we are just express some kind of violence, these things. Are these individual, but as an organization and a group of people. Now, for example, the recent meeting in Dharamsala, about 600 people from 19 countries. Now, actually met there. Everybody enjoyed equal sort of free discussion. Rinpoche professor as a elected political leadership since 2001. At the meeting, Rinpoche also just a simple Tibetan citizen. Equally sort of discussed. So they finally, after 6 days of discussion, at that time I deliberately avoid. If I go there, if I indicate my feeling, then that might be hindrance for their free expression. So finally